Today we're going to talk about two murders that seem eerily similar. The only problem is they happened 157 years apart. But before we get started, welcome to True Crime with Maneater. If you love all things true crime, including missing person cases, cold cases, and just as strange happenings in the world, you've come to the right place. Be sure to subscribe and turn on alerts so you never miss a video upload. Let's get started. Today's case takes us to Erdington, Birmingham, in England. Erdington is a quaint and quiet suburb that dates back to the 9th century. It started as a rural village, but eventually transitioned and turned into a popular midway point for those traveling between Chester and London in the 18th and 19th centuries. But the case of two murdered women seems to haunt the quiet suburb. On May 27, 1817, at around 6:30 a.m., a laborer known as George Jackson came across some strange things. He came across a water-filled pit, and when he approached it, he noticed there was a bundle of clothing, a hat, shoes, all near this pit of water. Of course, he was instantly suspicious, so he went and he gathered the locals, and they decided to drag this pool. Unfortunately, they found the body of Mary Ashford. When they found Mary and pulled her out of the water, they noticed bruising on her arms. They presumed that she had been raped and then murdered and thrown into the pit of water. Footsteps of a man and a woman were found in a nearby field next to the pit of water. Investigators would quickly dive in, and they would name a suspect in the case. A man named Abraham Thornton became the prime suspect in the murder of Mary. At the time, Mary Ashford was 20 years old. She was incredibly beautiful and had many suitors. On Monday, May 26, as Mary was walking to work, she stopped at her friend Hannah Cox's home, but just briefly to drop off a bundle of clothes that she had planned to wear later that night when they went out dancing. At 6 p.m. that evening, Mary had left work and arrived at Hannah Cox's home. The two of them got dressed together and got ready to attend the party. The two girls would head to Tyburn House together. They would enjoy their evening of dancing and hanging out. And while the two women are enjoying the festives, men approach them and they take interest in the women, and the women begin to dance with them. These two men were known as Benjamin Carter and Abraham Thornton. The four of them, Mary, her friend Hannah, and the two men, Benjamin and Thornton, left the dance around midnight. As the foursome is walking, Hannah says, "Okay, I'm going to go home." She's really close to home at this point. She heads home by herself. Benjamin decides that he hasn't had enough of the party, so he's going to go back to the dance, which leaves Mary and Thornton walking alone together. Mary is walking towards her grandfather's home, and Abraham Thornton is walking with her. At around 4 a.m. that morning, Mary returns back to Hannah's home to change into her work clothing. Of course, when she comes in, Hannah's like, "Where were you? What were you doing?" She wanted to know what Mary had been doing from the time they parted at midnight till 4 a.m. She would say that Mary was very calm and she appears to be in a great mood. And really all she told Hannah is that she had been spending some time with Thornton. But witnesses would put her alone on the road at a little after 4 a.m. that morning. So we can assume after she left Hannah's home, a little bit after 4 a.m., she was either going home or maybe going back to work. I'm not really sure why she didn't stop at Hannah's first to get her clothing and then go home, but I don't know, I guess that's not really important. Only a few hours later, Mary would be discovered dead. And by 8 a.m. the next morning, Abraham Thornton had been arrested for her murder. When he was arrested, he told the police, "I cannot believe she is murdered. Why, I was with her until 4 o'clock this morning." While being questioned by detectives, Abraham told them that they did have sex in the field, but it was consensual. And then until around 3 a.m., they just kind of lay there and talked and looked up at the stars and the moon and just enjoyed the evening together. He would say that eventually he would walk her part of the way back to Hannah's home, where he waited until she didn't come back for quite some time. And so he was tired and he decided to head home. And he would say that was the last time he saw her alive. He walked her halfway to Hannah's home, he waited there, and she didn't return, so he just went back home. Abraham's trial would begin on August 8th, and the public really did believe that he murdered Mary. Considering he was the last person to see her, he admitted to that, and he admitted to having sex with her. But 3 witnesses were called to the stand, and they confirmed Abraham's alibi. And because there was no concrete evidence, eventually Abraham was found not guilty. They simply couldn't prove that he was the one that murdered her. Sure, he was the last person to see Mary alive, but she had been at Hannah's home, and then Afterwards, presumably, she was going to walk home alone. So at some point, she could have been grabbed by another party goer or just somebody out at the wee hours of 4 a.m. And because this is 1817, something completely insane happens next. Mary had a brother named William Ashford, and he was enraged by the verdict. He just could not let it go. He would appeal for a second trial, but the person overseeing it, Lord Ellenborough, was like presiding over the case, would allow Abraham to defend his not guilty verdict by a battle. And it was a battle to the death. It was called a trial by battle, which was essentially proving yourself innocent by murdering somebody else, I guess. Completely bizarre. Abraham didn't back down from this challenge. He took off a leather glove and threw it over his head, which apparently meant that he was initiating the challenge. William wouldn't respond, and eventually everything was just kind of let go, though the public still thought that he was guilty of the murder of Mary. And because he was living under such public scrutiny, he would eventually leave his home in England and head to the US. He just couldn't stand being around people who thought he was a convicted killer. They were probably making his life significantly difficult because they firmly believed that he murdered this young, beautiful woman. This case pretty much went unsolved. They thought they had a suspect. They assumed that he did kill her, but they didn't have enough evidence to prove it. And everybody was very much aware of what happened to Mary Ashford throughout history. Exactly 157 years later, on May 27th, 1974, another 20-year-old woman would be murdered. The woman was left in a ditch on Chester Road near Erdington. Her body was found a few days after her death and showed signs of rape and strangulation. The woman was eventually identified as Barbara Forrest, who worked nearby as a nurse. Much like Mary, Barbara went missing on a Monday, and you'll never believe what she was doing on the night she went missing. On the evening of her death, Barbara was with her boyfriend Simon, and they were going to several bars and dancing and just enjoying the night together. Her boyfriend Simon would say that he walked her to the bus at around 1 a.m. that morning, and that was the last time he saw her alive. Police would have tons of suspects, but they would narrow in on one person, and this person's name was Michael Ian Thornton. Michael Thornton lived on Chester Road and was a co-worker of Barbara. And if you'll remember, a man named Abraham Thornton was accused of murdering a woman named Mary Ashford 157 years ago. Detectives would find blood on Michael Thornton's pants, and when they talked to his mother, Michael's alibi soon fell through. So he was arrested and charged with the murder of Barbara Forrest. And when I said that this case was eerily similar, that was a gross understatement. This case is almost identical. Michael Thornton was put on trial, and because there was a lack of physical evidence, he was found not guilty. And in another striking similarity, Barbara had a sister named Erica, and she was very upset by what happened at trial and just refused to believe that he wasn't guilty. In 2012, Erica would demand that they reopen the case and test with DNA evidence because now they had DNA testing that they didn't have in 1974. So she demanded that they open it and that they DNA test to see who actually did this. What's even more startling is both women had these really bad feelings leading up to their death. Mary Ashford would tell her best friend's mother, Hannah's mother, about feelings she had towards the upcoming week. She told Hannah's mother that she had bad feelings about the week to come. 10 days before Barbara Forrest was murdered, she told a coworker, quote, "This is going to be my unlucky month. I just know it. Don't ask me why." Both murders do remain unsolved today. Hopefully they will open Barbara's case and DNA test now that they have the evidence. This is England, so I'm not sure about the double jeopardy rule. I just know that in America, once you've been tried for murder and found not guilty, they can't try you again. I'm not sure about the UK. Many people believe that these cases aren't just eerily similar. They believe that something more sinister is at play, whether that's somebody planning to murder Barbara Forrest because they knew of Mary Ashford's murder and tried to make it look similar, or if Mary has been reincarnated as Barbara and the same fate fell upon her. There's a lot of different theories out there. One thing is for sure, though, these cases are just almost identical. I mean, I was shocked when I read about them and just how closely related they were. Both women made eerie predictions about what was going to happen to them in the future, and they both turned out to be right. They both had very bad feelings, and those feelings turned out to be true. But I would love to know your thoughts on this case. Was this just very eerie similarities? Was this something more sinister? What do you think? But that's it for today, guys. If you like this video or any other video on my channel, be sure to subscribe and turn on alerts so you never miss video upload. If there's a case you'd like me to cover, pop in the comments below, and I'll be sure to get to it. In the meantime, check out some other videos on my channel while you wait for the next upload, and I'll see you then.